There's one kind of person a narcissist always underestimates: the empath. They live through genuine emotions, believe in kindness, and keep thinking that if they just love hard enough, with enough sincerity, the other person will eventually change. They believe in the power of patience, forgiveness, and the idea that wounds can be healed through love. What they don't realize is that in the hands of a narcissist, kindness becomes a weapon to be used against them. Because when you love a narcissist, you're not really loving a person, you're loving an image, a performance, a mirror reflecting back what you want to believe is real. They make you feel loved, understood, and seen. But it's all an illusion, carefully constructed to keep you dependent. And once they know they've captured your mind, the mask begins to fall. A narcissist doesn't love you, they love the attention you give them. They don't seek connection, they seek control. They don't crave love, they crave the sense of power that comes from manipulating someone's emotions. Every word, every gesture, every silence has a purpose. They know how to make you feel guilty, how to make you doubt yourself, how to make you believe you're the problem. They can apologize, cry, or promise to change, but only if it helps them keep you in their loop of control. And then comes the moment when the empath finally sees clearly where they are. They stop making excuses, stop explaining, stop hoping that a little more love will fix things. They go silent, not out of weakness, but because they understand. They realize that silence can be the most powerful answer of all. That not reacting is a form of resistance, and in that moment, the power begins to shift. When the empath stops reacting, the narcissist loses their only source of energy, your reaction. When you no longer argue, prove, or explain, their entire manipulation strategy collapses. They don't know what to do when they can't control your emotions anymore, because for them, power doesn't lie in truth, it lies in their ability to make you doubt yourself. And when you stay calm, they lose that power. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not about making them suffer the way you did. It's about reclaiming ownership of your own emotions, about no longer letting someone else define your worth. It's about learning to face the truth and realizing you don't need to win against anyone. You just need to conquer your own fear. We're going to walk through that journey together, from the moment a good-hearted person gets trapped in the narcissist's game to the moment they awaken, detach, and begin to heal. Step by step, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with understanding, boundaries, and self-respect. If you've ever had someone make you feel like you weren't enough, if you've ever asked yourself, how could they do that? Then this video is for you. Because sometimes victory doesn't come from making them regret losing you. It comes from learning to live in peace, in self-control, and in freedom from needing their validation. Nothing hurts a narcissist more than watching the person they once controlled now stand tall, silent, and completely free. An empath usually enters a relationship with a narcissist through pure, unquestioning trust. They see the good in the other person, no matter how small, and believe that with enough love, enough patience, they can awaken that goodness. They're not naive, they're simply so attuned to other people's pain that they often mistake suffering for sincerity. When the narcissist talks about their tragic past, the empath doesn't doubt. They feel compassion. When the narcissist gets angry, they don't get defensive, they want to understand. And that's exactly where the first door of manipulation quietly opens. In the beginning, narcissists do something incredibly clever. They mirror. They listen closely so they can replicate your emotions. They say the things you long to hear, match your every interest, and make you believe you've finally found someone who truly understands you. This is the love-bombing stage. Everything feels perfect. Every message is sweet. Every gesture feels designed just for you, and for the empath, who lives by intuition and emotional connection, this feels like magic, like finally meeting a soul who speaks the same language. But it's not a connection, it's a calculated imitation. Then, slowly, after they've gained your trust, the game shifts. Compliments turn into subtle criticisms, warm gestures are mixed with sudden coldness. You start feeling confused, trying to bring back the good version of them you met in the beginning. Every time they pull away, you think, maybe I did something wrong. And so you chase, explaining, apologizing, trying harder to make things right. Every reaction you give becomes data, information they use to master the art of controlling your emotions. The truth is, empaths can endure far more emotional pain than most people. They're used to carrying others' burdens, to being the healer, but endurance isn't the same as strength. Not when it costs you your sense of self. At this point, many empaths reach emotional burnout, exhausted yet pretending to be fine, sensing that something is deeply wrong but unable to leave. And then, one day, something shifts inside. It's not anger, it's a strange, lucid silence. A thought flashes through their mind. I'm not too sensitive, I've just been hurt for too long. They start looking back at everything that's happened and see a pattern. Praise, then devalue. Love, then withdrawal. Attention, then disappearance. Apology, then repetition. They realize they're not crazy, it was all intentional, and in that very moment they stop blaming themselves. The empath's awakening doesn't come from resentment, it comes from understanding. They begin to see that love cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved, that they are not responsible for healing wounds the other person refuses to face, and that kindness should never be used to excuse disrespect. From here, they start pulling their energy back, not because they don't care, but because they've learned that care must have boundaries. They speak less, observe more. They stop explaining everything, knowing the narcissist was never really listening. They stop trying to please. And when that silence arrives, the narcissist begins to panic. Because for them, control only exists as long as you react. When you go silent, every manipulation tool becomes useless. They try getting angry, they play the victim. They even try to bring back the sweet version from the start. But you're different now. You don't chase, you don't cry, you don't believe their hollow promises anymore. You watch them calmly, as if watching a play you once starred in. Only now, you know every line by heart. That is the awakening, not the moment you walk away, but the moment you realize you're no longer being controlled. You understand that real love doesn't make you afraid. It doesn't demand you to prove your worth. It doesn't ask you to lose yourself to be accepted. And from that moment on, the game is over. No fights, no revenge, no need to prove anything. Just one simple truth: you have awakened. If you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you've probably asked yourself hundreds of times, why do they do this? How can someone be so cold, deceitful, even cruel, when they once seemed to love me so deeply? The answer lies in how their mind processes emotion and self-worth. A narcissist doesn't perceive love the way you do. To them, love isn't connection, it's leverage. It's a means to sustain their sense of power. Most narcissists don't consciously see themselves as manipulators. They genuinely believe they deserve attention, admiration, and obedience. Beneath their arrogance lies an enormous fear, the terror of being seen as small, unworthy, or abandoned. To survive that fear, they build a flawless shell, always right, always strong, always superior. But that shell is fragile. It only exists as long as someone else keeps reinforcing it, and an empath, with their open heart and deep desire to understand, becomes the perfect source of that reinforcement. At the beginning, the narcissist presents themselves as your ideal soulmate. They mirror you, liking what you like, speaking the way you speak, caring about what you care about. They're not actually feeling, they're studying you. They observe what makes you smile, what makes you worry, what makes you hurt, and they use that information to construct the illusion of deep connection. It feels like destiny, but it's not connection, it's calculated mimicry. Once they've secured your emotions, the control phase begins. The more you invest emotionally, the more power they gain. They start testing that power, going silent to see if you'll panic, making a cutting joke to gauge your tolerance, giving a compliment and an insult in the same breath to confuse you. They call it testing, but it's really emotional conditioning, training you to associate love with instability. A narcissist doesn't feel other people's emotions in a normal way. When you hurt, they don't feel pain with you, they observe it. Your emotions are data, measurements of their power. If you cry, it means they still have influence. If you argue, they still have control. If you apologize, they've won. But if you stay calm, detached, and silent, they begin to panic, because to them, control over your emotions equals existence itself. They need attention the way a human needs air. Without it, they begin to collapse inward. To prevent that collapse, they'll create any storyline necessary: victim, misunderstood, soul, or lonely hero, as long as you remain emotionally engaged. That's why, after every time they hurt you, they often return with tears, apologies, or a confession of how broken they are. You soften, and the cycle begins again. But make no mistake, they know exactly what they're doing. The difference is that in their internal belief system, power matters more than truth. They need to feel above others, because facing their inner emptiness would destroy them. That's why, when you start withdrawing your energy, when you stop reacting, they lash out. They'll provoke drama, guilt, chaos, or quickly seek new supply to fill the void. To them, the worst loss isn't losing you, it's losing their ability to control you. In modern psychology, this behavior is seen as an extreme defense mechanism, a false self built to protect a fragile ego. But tragically, to keep that false self alive, they are willing to destroy anyone who threatens it. And when an empath begins to awaken, the narcissist perceives it as a direct threat, because their illusion of absolute power starts to crumble. This is where the power reversal begins. They were once the observer, now you see them clearly. They once controlled your reactions, now you control your own. And for a narcissist, losing control over someone else's emotions is the ultimate psychological collapse. In the next part, we'll explore that moment when the empath stops chasing, stops seeking answers, and begins to observe instead of react. Because from that moment on, the empath begins to reclaim ownership of their life, and the narcissist begins to unravel. At some point, everything begins to change, not because the empath has grown cold, but because they are simply exhausted, tired of explaining, tired of trying to understand, tired of carrying the emotional weight for someone else. They no longer have the strength to keep chasing a conversation that always shifts direction, where every word they say is twisted and every emotion they express is used against them. The turning point doesn't arrive with an explosion. It comes in silence. In a quiet evening when they realize they've cried too many times and nothing has changed. In a conversation where it suddenly becomes clear that the other person isn't listening, only waiting for their turn to strike back. In a fleeting moment when they hear their own trembling, weary voice and think, "This isn't me," the empath starts to see the pattern. They notice how every phase of affection is followed by a long, icy void, how every apology is just a reset button for another round of control. They recognize the cycle: praise, devalue, silence, return, apology, repeat. And the most painful realization? They see how they've changed. From confident and hopeful to cautious, apologetic, and constantly trying to keep the peace. That's when they finally understand the problem was never them, it was the game they didn't know they were playing. And once you realize it's a game, you stop playing. You no longer move to their rhythm, no longer react the way they expect. You begin to observe. At first, the narcissist panics. They'll say you've become cold, distant, emotionless, but in truth, you're simply no longer controllable. When you stop explaining, they lose their ability to twist the narrative. When you stop reacting, they lose their source of emotional power. When you stop trying to prove yourself, they lose the mirror that once reflected their illusion of superiority. This turning point marks the beginning of psychological freedom. The empath realizes that silence is not defeat, it's a boundary. They begin to see the difference between kindness and endurance, between love and self-destruction. They learn that calmness is not weakness, it's a new kind of strength. The strength of someone who no longer needs to be accepted to feel worthy. From here, the empath's perception of the world changes. They stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why did I allow it to continue?" That question isn't about self-blame. It's about reclaiming power. As they start reflecting on their boundaries, beliefs, and reactions, they realize something profound: they can choose differently. The truth is, the narcissist will never change. But your response can change everything, and when you change, they lose power. They don't know what to do with someone who no longer fears, needs, or reacts to them. They'll try every tactic to pull you back: promises, pleas, guilt, even fake transformation. But the empath has seen the same play too many times, and this time, they no longer want to play. The turning point isn't when you walk away, it's when you stop being pulled back. It's when you can look at them, hear the same old words, and feel nothing left to prove. It's when you realize that your inner peace is more precious than any endless argument. That's the moment the empath steps out of the cycle of control, not with rage, but with clarity. They don't need to scream to be heard. They only need to say one simple sentence: "I understand now." And in psychology, that moment of understanding is the first true sign of healing. After this turning point, the relationship is never the same. You are no longer their supply. You start living differently, responding differently, and most importantly, you begin choosing peace over validation. In the next part, we'll go deeper into that stage when the empath truly detaches from the chaos, when they withdraw their energy, stop needing to win, and by doing so, trigger the narcissist's collapse. After the empath finally sees the truth of the relationship, something natural begins to happen. They start pulling their energy back. No more explaining, no more arguing, no more trying to be understood. This is the stage of outer silence, but inner transformation. Because detachment isn't a single decision, it's a psychological revolution. When you've been conditioned to react, silence at first feels empty. You might even ask yourself, am I being too cold? Am I being heartless? But slowly, you begin to realize that your silence isn't punishment, it's protection. It's not about shutting someone out, it's about letting peace back in. During this phase, the empath faces two parallel fears: the fear of losing them and the fear of losing yourself. For so long, your self-worth has been tied to being seen, loved, and accepted. But as you begin to detach, you realize something profound: that real love never asks you to trade your peace for it, and that false love, no matter how passionate it once felt, isn't worth the pain of self-betrayal. Detachment doesn't mean hatred, it means the end of emotional dependence. Before, every text, every gesture, every shift in their mood triggered a reaction in you. Now, you simply observe. You stop letting other people's emotions dictate your state of mind. You stop chasing to prove your worth. You simply stand still and see clearly. And it's precisely in that stillness that power begins to shift. The narcissists don't know how to handle silence. They thrive on controlling reactions, so when you stop reacting, they panic. They'll try everything to reawaken your anger, guilt, or pity, the emotional buttons they've always used to pull you back. But once you're detached, you start recognizing those tactics as clearly as if you were looking through glass, and when you stop playing by their rules, they lose control of the game. In psychology, this process is called emotional disengagement, the gradual cutting of toxic emotional bonds. It doesn't happen overnight. Some days you'll feel weak, tempted to return, or hollow inside, but every day you choose silence over conflict, calm over reaction. You reclaim more of your emotional sovereignty. One of the clearest signs of detachment is when you can look back without anger. You no longer need them to admit their faults. You no longer need an apology. You no longer need them to change. You only need your peace. And that's something a narcissist will never understand, because to them, silence equals defeat, but to you, silence means freedom. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. You stop caring about who's right or wrong, and instead ask one question: does this bring me peace? If the answer is no, you walk away, quietly, calmly, without regret or explanation, because now you understand, leaving isn't the end, it's the beginning of coming home to yourself. For the empath, this is the stage of reconstruction. They start rebuilding their life, piece by piece. They learn to set boundaries, to say no without guilt, to invest their energy in healthy relationships. They no longer need to prove their worth, because they finally understand their worth was never something to be proven. For the narcissist, this is a nightmare. They lose access to your emotions, and when they lose access, they lose their lifeline. Every old tactic fails. Anger no longer works, pity no longer works, even promises to change fall flat. Because now you don't react, you simply observe and walk away. Detachment is the dividing line between pain and healing. It's when you understand that not everyone deserves your explanation, not every battle deserves your presence, and not every relationship deserves to be saved. You stop trying to win, you simply want to be free. And when you do that, you don't just escape a person, you escape a pattern, the old pattern of suffering to earn love. Detachment is the moment you can finally say, I don't hate you, I just don't want to spend any more energy on you. And the moment you say that, the game ends, not with revenge, but with the calm of someone who can no longer be controlled. In the next part, we'll go deeper into silence and indifference, the weapons of stillness, the stage where detachment transforms into strength. When the empath not only stops reacting, but begins to stand tall, and their indifference becomes the very force that brings the narcissist's entire illusion crashing down. When the empath finally falls silent, the narcissist has no idea what's happening. They're used to your reactions, your anger, your explanations, your tears, your desperate attempts to make things right. Every reaction once served as proof that they still had power. They fed on that energy, the chaos they created inside your mind. But this time, you don't react. You just stay silent. And in that moment, their entire game begins to tremble. Silence in the hands of an awakened soul becomes a form of power. It's not a weapon of attack, it's a boundary of peace. When you stop reacting, you reclaim control over your own mind. Every time they provoke, you don't respond. When they spread rumors, you don't defend yourself. When they go silent to punish you, you don't chase. Slowly they begin to panic, realizing the very tools they once used to control you have lost their effect. A narcissist may understand exactly how to manipulate emotions, but they have no idea how to face calmness. Silence takes away what they need most, your reaction. Without emotions to exploit, without energy to drain, without a story to twist, they fall into a void. For them, silence isn't just distance, it's the death of power. From a psychological perspective, silence can be seen as the withdrawal of emotional reinforcement. Before, every time they hurt you and you reacted, you unknowingly reinforced their manipulative behavior. But when you stop reacting, that entire system collapses. The narcissist no longer feels alive through you. They start to unravel, because in their world, attention equals existence. When you withdraw that attention, they lose the mirror that once reflected their ego back to them. To a narcissist, indifference hurts more than anger. Anger is still connection. Indifference is the end of one. When you're still angry, they still exist in your mind. When you hate them, they still have power. But when you feel indifferent, they disappear, not from the world, but from your psychological reality. Indifference declares that they're no longer significant, that they've lost the center stage in your consciousness. And for a narcissist, that truth is more brutal than any insult could ever be. After everything, the empath finally understands. They don't need to win an argument. They don't need to prove they were right. They don't need to return the pain they once received. They just need peace. And silence becomes their way of saying, I've understood enough. I don't need any more words. That's not surrender. It's emotional maturity. When they stay silent, the narcissist scrambles to regain control. They may lash out, spread lies, play the victim, or come back with apologies. But none of it works anymore. Every old tactic fails in the face of calm. The empath no longer spins inside the chaos. They see every manipulation clearly, recognize every act, and feel no emotion being stolen. One of the surest signs of healing is when you can look at them and feel nothing. No anger, no hatred, no need. You see them, you understand them, but you're no longer moved by them. The emotions that once chained you are gone. You are free, not because they disappeared, but because they no longer define your feelings. Silence, when understood properly, is not emptiness. It's a declaration. There's, I don't need to defeat you, I just need to stop losing myself. When you reach that point, you are no longer the victim, you are the master of your own peace. And that is what completely destroys the narcissist. Because to them, silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the end of control. But for you, it's the beginning of freedom. In the end, what remains is not anger but emptiness. When the empath finally walks away from the narcissist, they don't feel triumphant, they simply feel exhausted. They once loved with their whole heart, believed in the goodness of the other person, and had to accept the painful truth that sometimes love is not enough to save a soul. Healing begins in silence. There are no more arguments, no more text messages, no more hollow apologies, only the empath alone sitting with the fragments of what's left inside. At first, the quiet feels unsettling. They've grown used to the noise, the emotional chaos, the constant fear of being abandoned. But gradually they realize that this silence isn't loss, it's recovery. The empath starts relearning the simplest things: how to sleep without waiting for a message, how to smile without needing validation, how to enjoy peace without guilt. They begin to fill their life with small, genuine joys: a morning cup of coffee, a peaceful walk, an honest conversation with themselves. And with each passing day, they feel their energy slowly returning. Healing doesn't come from forgetting the narcissist. It comes from understanding the lesson behind the relationship. They realize they were never weak. They simply loved the wrong person. Kindness was never their flaw. It just needed to be given to someone worthy. And they finally understand that love should never require losing oneself in the process. Real love doesn't make you smaller. It helps you grow into your truest self. Throughout recovery, the empath passes through many emotional layers: sadness, regret, doubt, and sometimes even longing. But then one morning they wake up and notice something different. The pain doesn't sting anymore. The memories that once made them cry now bring only a soft, distant smile. That's when they realize they've made it through. For the narcissist, this is something they can neither understand nor endure. They were used to seeing you broken, emotional, and dependent, but they don't know how to react when you are happy without them. They may try to return, remind you of the good times, or say, "We once had something special." Yet for the healed empath, the past no longer holds any power. Your peace becomes the debt they can never repay. They can only manipulate the wounded. They have no control over the healed. They can only dominate those still searching for their worth, never those who found it within themselves. And when you no longer need them to feel whole, their game ends forever. The empath steps into a new chapter, not merely one of escape, but of rebirth. They no longer carry their scars as symbols of pain, but as proof of strength. They no longer say, "I was hurt," but rather, "I have learned." They stop trying to forgive or fix the narcissist and instead live in a way that no longer keeps the past alive. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's about no longer reacting the same way. When you can see the person who once hurt you and feel no bitterness, that's when you've truly won, not over them, but over yourself. In the narcissist's game, they only win if you keep suffering. But when you rise, move forward and live well, you reclaim everything. Your dignity, your peace, your freedom. And to them, your happiness without them is the cruelest punishment of all. Because a narcissist can survive being hated, but they cannot survive being forgotten. When you heal, you achieve what they never will, the ability to face yourself, to understand, and to finally transcend. After everything, what you find is not victory, but freedom. Not freedom from a person, but freedom from the emotions that once bound you. You no longer wake up afraid of being judged, no longer tense up when someone goes silent, and no longer question yourself wondering, what did I do wrong? You begin to live again, lighter, truer, and calmer. Freedom doesn't arrive overnight. It grows from the small choices you make each day. Choosing silence over arguments, peace over chaos, letting go instead of proving your worth. Every one of those small choices is part of the process of reclaiming ownership of your life. True freedom isn't built on resistance, but on the gentle act of releasing what no longer deserves your energy. Now you are no longer the person who begged for recognition. You are no longer the one who equated love with saving others. You've become someone who can say no without guilt, set boundaries without explanation, and smile without needing anyone's approval. Most importantly, you understand that peace doesn't come from others, it comes from within yourself. So when the narcissist looks back, they won't understand what happened. They'll think you changed too quickly. But the truth is, you didn't change, you returned. You returned to your true self. The one who once loved sincerely and believed in goodness, but is now wise enough to protect that heart from the wrong people. They'll try to reassert control, to rekindle old emotions, to say, we can make it work again, but this time you just smile. You've seen the entire game, and once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. True freedom begins the moment you no longer need them to understand. You don't need to explain why you left or have anyone admit that you were right. You simply need to feel at peace in your own company, to know that your worth no longer depends on praise or attention. When you accept that silence itself can be an answer, you start living as someone who has nothing left to prove. From that moment on, everything inside you shifts. Your voice becomes softer, your eyes brighter, and your smile real. You no longer carry the energy of someone wounded, but of someone awakened. You no longer seek empathy, you become the source of peace for yourself. And it's in that transformation that you step into the realm they can never reach. A narcissist may steal your time, your trust, and your tears, but they can never touch a soul that has healed. They know how to control the wounded, but they are powerless against those who have learned to protect their spirit. They can handle being hated, but they cannot bear being forgotten. And when you heal, when you find genuine happiness, you vanish from their world. Not because you ran away, but because you rose to a higher level they'll never access. Freedom isn't forgetting, it's no longer being pulled backward. You're no longer haunted, no longer reactive, no longer crying over the same person. You still remember, but you no longer ache. You still see, but you no longer fear. You can talk about the past without trembling because you've gone through it, and that is true freedom. When you live in peace, you no longer need revenge. Your serenity is the answer. You no longer need to prove anything because your life itself has become the proof. You don't need anyone to apologize because you've stopped needing them in order to forgive. The empath doesn't win by destroying the narcissist. They win by rising, healing, and becoming the best version of themselves. In the end, what makes you different isn't the pain you endured. It's the way you transform that pain into power. You no longer live in reaction, but in awareness. You no longer seek validation, but truth. And when you reach that state, they can no longer touch you, not through words, not through memories, not through fear. True freedom isn't running away from someone. It's being able to stay with yourself without feeling lonely. It's being able to look back and say, gently but firmly, I have walked through the darkness, and I no longer need anyone else's light to shine.